The Russian military has begun large-scale military drills in occupied Ukrainian Crimea and the Black Sea. Now, Russia has for weeks amassed tens of thousands of troops in and around Ukraine. In his annual State of the Nation speech yesterday, Russian President Vladimir Putin warned the West against interfering in Russia's affairs, saying, quote, "Those who organize any provocations that threaten our fundamental security interests will regret their actions like they have not regretted anything for a long time." Strong words. To talk more about this now, I want to bring in CBS News intelligence and national security reporter Olivia Gazis. Thanks for joining us this morning, Olivia. So tens of thousands of Russian troops encircling mainland Ukraine. Are you hearing anything from intelligence officials about what they think Putin's plans are?
Good morning, Anne-Marie. Yes, what sources have told me and what intelligence and defense officials have said publicly about Putin's intentions is that this is really more of a show of force for the moment, signaling to the Ukrainians and to the Americans what he is capable of. For now, this is more about projecting power than it is about actually using it. That kind of assessment stems from a couple of things, including what we know about Putin himself. Namely that he likes to look tough. We have any number of pictures of him bare-chested on horseback as evidence of that, right? It also stems, though, from what we can observe about the buildup itself. For one, it's very observable. He has made no disguise of moving men, tanks, missiles to the border. In some cases, the Russian ministry has even announced some of those moves in advance. So this is really about, right now, credibly projecting that Russia is poised to invade, but really to Putin, the perception of that is as effective or more effective than actually the reality of an invasion would be. The Pentagon's assessment is that Russia has positioned itself to have the option for a limited strike, but this, according to our Pentagon correspondent David Martin, no invasion is imminent, certainly not within the next 1 to 3 days, but all eyes are on that buildup, and it's being monitored closely.
So then when Vladimir Putin, warns that Russian response to provocations would be, quote, asymmetrical, they would be quick and tough, is this just sort of rhetoric? A military invasion would hardly be asymmetrical. So is this just talk?
Sure. I thought it was really interesting that he used that term asymmetrical because it's kind of a tacit admission that he doesn't want to engage militarily head to head. We know that Russia has favored asymmetric tools like cyber attacks, like influence operations for years because it wants to operate at that below the level of armed conflict because it stands to lose any armed conflict that it chooses to engage in with the West. And it's also in part because its calculus, Russia's calculus, has been proven over and over. I mean, it did not cost much to wage an influence campaign on Facebook and Twitter targeting the U.S. elections in 2016, 18, 20. But the perception of that was outsized. The Russians, we thought may have successfully either changed votes or influenced voters in a certain direction, and that roiled the country for years. That's a big dividend for something that really did not cost much for Putin to order to happen. It's also true of, for example, both the attempted and successful assassinations that Russia has carried out beyond its own soil, the poisoning of Sergei Skripal and Alexei Navalny. Russia, in doing that, says to the world, we will target our enemies and we will reach them wherever they are. That kind of behavior, deniable, targeted, meddlesome, disruptive, but cost-effective, is often looks more serious than it actually is. And it's enough for Russia to achieve two main goals. One, to project outsized power, more power than it actually has. And two, to deter its adversaries from taking further steps to escalate engagement with Moscow.
So we know that Ukraine has been sort of appealing to NATO's leaders. Ukraine is not part of NATO. They would love to be, but that doesn't look like it's going to happen anytime soon anyways. Russia has criticized NATO's presence and military buildup close to its borders. Is that whataboutism, or is this the sort of thing that Russia is talking about when they talk about provocations?
You're right. Yes, Ukraine has appealed to the U.S. insistently now for weeks. And the U.S. has promised repeatedly to stand by Ukraine and to exact costs from Moscow if it becomes necessary. The White House is said now to be weighing supplying additional lethal defensive aid to Kiev but it has not issued that yet. The State Department said yesterday that it was engaged in a continuing assessment of what the Ukrainians might need. No doubt supplying additional aid would be seen by Russia as an additional provocation and risks coaxing it into further buildup. And all interested parties at the moment seem to prefer to sticking to stern warnings and shows of force. We know that diplomacy is churning, right? The U.S. ambassador to Russia is coming back here for consultations with the administration. U.S. embassy officials have been meeting with their counterparts in Moscow. The national security advisor engaged with his counterpart by the phone. And of course, all eyes are on whether or not President Biden and President Putin do indeed meet in person in the coming weeks in a third country for an in-person summit.
Well, the eyes of the world will be watching. Olivia, thank you.
Thanks so much, Anne-Marie.